Over the course of the Christmas, I took out another book. This one's called The Men Will Talk to Me. It's by Ernie O'Malley. And what it covers is the survivors of the War of Independence and the Civil War that was after it. What had happened after the 1916 Rising. A lot of people kind of woke up to the fact that there's a big war going on in Europe. Um, we're fighting for the British, and the British are fighting for the little countries. And isn't Ireland not a little country? What's the story there? How come we're sending thousands of our Irishmen over to fight another man's war? So, as a consequence of that question being raised, um, a lot of people started looking to the IRB and to look at the Republican movement for independence from Ireland. Now, back in 1916 in Mayo, there was two brigades, a north and a south. However, after 1917, there was so many people enlisting in the brigades and volunteering in the brigades that they had to break it down into four brigades. Where were these people coming from? It turns out around 1917, 1918, Cumann na mBan was established, the women's organisation. On top of that, you had the Irish Scout movement as well. A lot of young Irish people. The Scout movement was set up by an Englishman, Baden Powell, I think it was. It took on in Ireland, especially during the Great War years. So there was an awful lot of, there was resources there. And what I got from reading the different interviews in the books, I realised that places like Louisburg, Castlebar, Ballina, they all had strong, it was noted in the book that those areas had a strong influence, be it from Cumann na mBan and from the Irish Scouts. Now, funnily enough, I didn't see anything here in the book about the GAA. But what I got from that was the Cumann na mBan, the ladies, they provided shelter for the volunteers. They provided food, first aid, and they basically kept the organisation running for the men. A lot of the men were coming from the Irish Scouts. They were also coming from the RIC, the Mayo Royal Irish Constabulary. A lot of men had who were working in the RIC literally deserted their posts. And so what happened was a lot of volunteers in those particular areas, particularly, they started confronting with the RIC, with the British Army, and with the Black and Tans. Numerous ambushes were recorded. Most notably would have been the Tourmakeedy ambush. And what I got from firstly getting back to the whole organization, the Cumann na mBan and the Irish Scouts, like those areas today have a very strong community volunteering ethos in those areas. They're very good at organizing events and organizing clubs, and they're just good at that sort of thing. And I just wonder, is that a generational thing, a sort of metal that has been kept going, kept alive through all this time that we've been through. Um, and on the other side, or getting back to the men that were fighting in the Civil War, they had to fight against the Black and Tans, the British Army, and the RIC. And they did that for a few years until we won the independence, the fight for independence. Although England didn't recognise us as a separate state as such, but we were left with the ultimatum, either pro-treaty or anti-treaty. And what I got from this, like the men that fought so gallantly during the war for independence, those that did decide to go anti-treaty, it didn't fare out very well for them, because a lot of them ended up getting arrested, and a lot of them were arrested, but they were betrayed by their own communities, and that really hit something there. And I say to myself, like, what's the point of having freedom if you don't have freedom of choice? And those lads, they made a decision, but somebody in their community betrayed them, for good or for bad. It's still, it makes you wonder about how we live our lives today. And furthermore, when I think about what's going on in the Ukraine war at the moment, there's talk of a treaty. Um, on the Ukrainian side, there will be a split. If there will be people who want the war to stop, and then there'll be an awful lot of people who want to keep the war going. And when that split happens, like right now, the Ukraine war is between Ukraine and Russia. It's more clear cut. Whereas if it's a civil war, when it's a fight amongst ourselves or themselves, like it's very, very personal. And the people that there will be betrayal, and it will split communities. And never mind the Ukrainian side, but the Russian side as well. Like, even if there is a treaty, even if there is an agreement, it's very hard to see the Russian army simply pulling back to barracks and putting an end to the whole chapter. It just doesn't work like that. Human beings just don't work like that. So it'll be interesting to see what it's almost possible to see that even if there is a peace agreement drawn up and both sides adhere to it, it's not the end of the conflict, not by a long shot. Um, but getting back to the book, um, the volunteers that had to fight, who were they fighting? Firstly, they were fighting the British Army. Now, the British Army were stationed in Castlebar and in Galway as well, and the main function of the British Army was to maintain control of the country. And there was a corollary with that, like they couldn't get too heavy-handed, at the same time as the British Army were trying to maintain control in 1917, 1918, 1919. You had Stalin in Russia with the Red Guard sweeping through townlands and murdering entire towns, and lots of people. Like, so when you compare the British Army with what was going on in Russia, the British showed an element of honor in that they followed the rules as best as an occupying army could do. And even from reading from the book, they were saying that there was a respectable distance between the volunteers and the British Army. Whenever there would have been exceptions to that cause, of course. When British soldiers were getting killed, there would be revenge attacks done on behalf of the British Army. You had the Royal Irish Constabulary, the Mayo branch of it. What the RIC, the sergeants, particularly the sergeants and the inspectors in the area, observed was the fact that so many of the Mayo members of the RIC just left their posts, and that created a massive vulnerability in that organization. In that, those guys would know the layout of all the different guard houses, where the weapons are stored, who to take out and who to keep, who to those volunteers would have an intimate knowledge of the RIC and its workings in Mayo. And as a consequence of that, like for the RIC, the few of them that were left in it, it was a very personal thing to know that everybody knew their name, everybody knew how they operated. So the sergeants that did try to dissuade the black and tans from burning people out of their homes and murdering people, they were they were given respectable, whereas the ones um, um, that weren't amenable to the Irish cause, they were shot. Then we have the Black and Tans, and they were, well, I mentioned before the Red Guard in Russia. Well, this was the Irish version of the Red Guard. They were the Black Guards. There are stories there about our local man, Tom, or Boland. There's an account there of a local man who is murdered by these people. There's also an account there of two men, identification unknown, who were literally dragged from the back of a truck from Galway all the way through Mayo until there was nothing left of them. It was really despicable and dishonourable what the Black and Tans did, and even the king himself at the time admitted that it was a push too far, albeit whereas it was a diplomatic play when you think about it, where you had the British Army whose mission was basically to control the country. They couldn't be seen as heavy-handed, whereas the Black and Tans were given the white card to go straight away and go to hell or to Connacht on us. So there might have been a bit of a policy there between those two groups. That's all I got from it. I really enjoyed reading into our past, and you can get so much power out of reading these books because regardless of what our backgrounds are, just by going back 30, 40, 50, 60 to 100 years and to see what our ancestors had to be put through and our communities had to be put through, and to see are there still echoes of these traumas and these decisions? Is there still echoes in our own communities today? I believe so. That's all I have to say. Take care.